Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Art 195, 3D modeling for animation for the spring semester 2022. Today, we will be continuing with our Reboot character. We built the head, we built the arms and the hands. Today, I want to build this little bottom bracket underneath his chin, if you want to call it that. And then move on to his main torso and legs. How much of that we will get accomplished today, I don't know, depending on how smoothly things go. Anyway, to get started with the bracket underneath here, there's a couple of tools that we'll be using. We're going to use the pole tool. Not pull evenly, but the pole tool. We're going to use the bend tool. And to make sure that the bends on both sides are even, we're going to use something called symmetry, which is at the bottom of your control list down here. Okay, so there's a lot going on. And in order to for symmetry to work, everything has to be aligned along the x-axis. So what's on the plus side has to be on the minus side exactly for it to work. So to do that, to align your model up, what you want to do is, I'm going to hold down, because I'm on a Mac and I'm on a laptop, I'm going to hold down the FN button and then hit F2. And you'll notice that my Reboot character moved and that he is perfectly aligned and perfectly centered. Okay, so that's the first step. And you can see that everything is the same on both sides. And we'll see that we should get symmetry to work here. But before we do, we're going to go ahead, before we use symmetry, we need to decide what tools to use. And again, we're going to simply start with a primitive. And if you look down here, it looks like it's a flattened and bent cylinder. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to go ahead with my create tool. And I'm going to come over here to disk and try to center this up here like so. And I'm guessing at the proportions here. And again, I want to make sure that the Y and the Z are the same to start with. They won't be afterwards, but I'm just going to say 1 and 1. 1 inch, because I'm working in inches here, and 1 inch. Okay. So I've got that centered up. I'll move that over a little bit so it's directly underneath my the head here. And then from the top view, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click and drag and pull that out a little bit. And again, I'm going to guesstimate how far it needs to come out. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm just going to go to the elbow, see if that works for me. With a little plus in the middle, you can see that it's basically aligned along the center. And actually, you know, that's too much. I just need it to be able to bend up to here. So that's way, way, way too much. I'm going to come back like so. And I'm going to come back like so. And I hit something else. So something else is kind of mucked up. But again, I want to make sure that it's centered up. This is probably still too much. Yep, it is. So let me zoom in a little bit just so I can get a better look. I can go all the way to here probably. And I can go all the way to here. And that ought to do it. Okay. Make sure that it's centered up. And now what I want to do is I can begin by flattening it If I need to make it a little bit smaller, I can. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten it now, like so. And that looks about right. So that it looks like a cylinder flattened with a little bulge in the middle, and then it's bent upward. But if I'm going to bend it, remember what we did with the forearms. I needed to add geometry in order to get that bend. So rather than have one segment here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to crank that up to maybe 48, 36, 48, something like that, just to get a boatload of them. And if I look at texture wired view, you can see that I have a whole bunch of extra polys in here, extra geometry that I'll need in order to be able to bend it. So it looks like I'm in pretty good shape, about the right proportions. If it needs to be a little bit bigger, then I'll go back and remake it, and we'll see. Okay. Maybe I will go ahead and I'll make it a little bit wider. Like so. There we go. Okay. I don't know if it's the right size or not. Again, there's a little bit of guesstimating that's going on here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fix it. And before I bend it up, I'm going to add that little bubble in the middle here. So to do that, I need to go under modify, and I'm going to use under more. I'm going to select not pull evenly as I did before, but just the pull tool, and making sure that I have, because I just want it to bulge above, not below. So it allows me a little bit more control. I also want to make sure that I have radial fall off selected. And again, with the top slider, a nice smooth curve is what I'm going for. So now what I want to do is, you know what? I goofed. I put it on the same layer, and it's going to screw everything up. So not to worry. I mean, it's easy to forget, you know, as I'm talking to you guys, I forget what I'm doing half the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off pull evenly, or pull rather. And I'm going to select, just make sure I have polys selected, select a handful of polys here, and then go up to select and say select connected. So everything is connected. I'm not missing any of the piece. So I'm going to hit Command X, cut it, go to a separate layer, put it in the foreground, put this one in the background, and hit paste. There we go. Otherwise, remember, if nothing is selected, then everything is selected. And that means the rest of the model would be affected by the pull tool as well as the bend tool. So again, these modification tools are extremely useful when starting with a basic primitive, and then adding geometry, and then deforming it or constructing it in any number of different ways to, you know, create a unique, more complex form. So I'm going to select pull, and then from the top view, I just, you know, I'm going to look and I want it like bloated like so. So I right click and drag about like so. And I'm going to right click and move it over so that it's centered. And then from the top view, let's see, it's moved up above a little bit. So I'm going to pull this down. No, I don't want that. There we go. Make sure that it overlaps the side a little bit. And then from the right view, again, pull that out a little bit. And then I'm going to move it down. Now, remember the fall off. If I were to put it over the center, it would fall off evenly on the top and the bottom, but I don't. I only want it to fall off on the top. So I'm moving it up a little bit, just like so. And now I'm ready to create that bulge. If I want this to be a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit smaller here. Whoops, undo that. Right click. Got to make sure that I pull it in just a little bit. Okay. So now what I can do is I want to, in order for this to work, if I try to make it work from the top view and I click and I drag, I'm not getting the results that I hope for. So release the mouse and hit undo. If I do the same from the perspective view, I hit left. Oh, it's looking nasty. The view that you want is the one that's perpendicular to this cylinder that we created. And so now if I go ahead and with the left mouse button, if I click and I drag and I move up, I'm moving the mouse forward. Notice that it's bending and it's bulging a little bit along the top, but not the bottom. That's exactly what I'm going for. Okay. So the pull tool can be really useful on any, it doesn't have to be a cylinder, but it could be on a box. But remember, you would need adequate geometry to build that. And I have the bulge that I'm looking for. Now I'm ready to bend up the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off the pull tool. And now I'm ready to use bend. And the same thing, I'm going to use a fall off. But this time, rather than radial, it's going to be a linear bend because I want it to bend up. So let's go ahead and again, under modify, we can go ahead and we can use the bend. Bend is right here. Okay. And now I'm going to build, go ahead and pull out from here the linear fall off. So let's make sure that we have that set to linear, and it is. And I'm going to right click and drag. Now, if I pull it out pretty far and I make sure that this is all lined up, so I'm right clicking with this, right clicking, pulling it in a little. Actually, if I were to pull it the whole way, or even don't use any at all. So let's go ahead and go back. I want to show you what happens if I select bend, but I don't use anything. Again, working perpendicular, and I bend it up, you'll notice that it's bending evenly in a nice even curve. That's okay, but that's not what I want. And I want to flatten this a little bit. It is a little bit too much. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stretch, and I'm going to flatten it a little, like so. That looks a little bit better. Actually, I'm going to undo it a couple of times. Now I'm going to hit H, and I'm going to flatten this just a little bit more. As I'm looking at this, I note, proportions and size, and you can always undo and make the necessary changes. So I'm back to where I was a moment ago. I'm going to go back under here and use pull tool, and notice that it went back to the settings that I'd used before. So it can go pretty quickly. So if at any time, don't be afraid of making a mistake. You can always undo. So I'll move that forward a little bit and make that bulge about like so. That's looking pretty good. Okay, that's what I want. Turn off pull. Now I'm going to bend it up. So let's go back and use the bend tool. Now I showed you what the bend tool looked like without any fall off. But, the question is, do I want a gradual fall off, or do I want one that's abrupt? Where it comes to a point is where the bend begins, and where the fat or wide part occurs is where the bend ends. And so I'm moving my clicking with the right mouse, and I'm getting this all aligned up along here. So I want a fairly abrupt bend here. It's taken me a minute to get this lined up. Now, what I want to also do is turn on symmetry. And as I click from here, okay, again, from the right side, and I click and I drag, notice that both sides now bend up. But if you're not careful, if your mouse goes to the left or it goes to the right, you can have problems. Now, when this goes all the way up, you can see that I started the bend too soon. So not to worry, Command Z, and let's go ahead and let's right click and move this back a little bit. And let's pull this forward a little bit. And let's try again. And hopefully it will start the bend right here and go up and into his shoulder. So now I left click and I drag again. And that's more like it. And now you can see that this needs to be much longer. So I should have made it a whole lot longer. So I can stretch it if I want before I bend it, or I can try a few things afterwards. So I'll show you, again, a lot of this, because a lot of this is kind of trial and error, even though I've done this, you know, every semester for several semesters now. You know, as you're working with it, it's gets a little bit, it's never quite the same. So that looks good. I like the placement of it, but again, this needs to stretch all the way up here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off bend, and I'm going to leave symmetry on. And I'm going to go ahead from here. And because this needs to come in a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and hit stretch, H for stretch. I'm going to control. I'm going to turn off symmetry for a minute, and I'm going to stretch in from the middle and bring it in so that it's directly, the end pieces are directly underneath the shoulder. And now what I can do is I can turn off stretch, and let's go ahead and right click here to select these polys over here. Okay, so they're all selected. Now I can go ahead and I can hit stretch again. And I can stretch it up. Make sure that it's underneath. Or better yet, what if I were to just take the top one? Let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and deselect, turn off that, deselect. And what I can do from, let's go ahead and zoom in. I'm going to hide. I'm going to look at display here. And under bottom left, I'm going to hide that for a minute so I can see a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on the back view. Again, all this trial and error. I'm going to go ahead and stretch a little bit again because it's off just a tad. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is turn off stretch. I'm just going to select, right click and drag around the top poly here. And now I'm going to turn symmetry back on. Now I'm going to hit T for move, and I'm going to move it up. And it didn't select the other one. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and make sure that the other one is selected. I'm going to turn off T for move. And let's go ahead, and I don't need symmetry turned on. Again, I'll right click. I'm going to hold down and shift click actually, and then right click around this. There we go. Now I'm going to hit T for move and move it up. And now they're both moving up until it goes into his shoulder. And then that will work. That's fine. No problem. I was hoping that the bend would have, when I bent it up, would automatically touch his shoulder, but sometimes, you know, if it's too long, then you need to shorten it. If it's too short, you need to lengthen it, and that's what I'm doing here. But overall, you know, not bad. It works just fine. So I'm going to turn off move. I'm going to deselect. Now I'm going to hit Q to add our surface texture. And I'm going to make that gold because that's what that is. Come on, come on, come on. Did I select polys or no? Where do I have here? What happened here? Q. I want gold. Is it colored or not? Let's turn this texture wired back to there. Yeah, it works. There we go. So there you have it. For something so complex, if you start with a basic form and try to pick it apart, you know, step by step, what I did was, you know, look at it carefully, decide, well, it looks sort of like a cylinder that's been flattened and bent. And I started with a cylinder, but in order to bend it, what I need to do is I need to use a lot of geometry in between. So as I constructed the cylinder, I added segments to it. And then to get this bulge, the pole tool, I used a radial fall off, made sure that the fall off did not extend to the bottom here, so that it's flat at the bottom, but it bulges at the top. And now we're ready to add his torso and to build his leg. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. And I'm going to go back to this layer and paste. And we got that. I probably should have had a smoother curve here, but it's okay for right now. And it probably should be moved back a little bit. So again, as I'm, you know, building this and I'm talking to you, I'm going to go ahead and select a few polys. I'm going to say select connected. And I'm going to hit T for move. And I'm going to move it over from the right view and up a little bit, and I'm good to go. You know, make sure that you look at all the views to make sure that everything is okay. So there we go. Turn off T for move, deselect, and now I'm ready to build his torso. His torso is nothing more than a cylinder. We don't have to do anything to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to create. I'm going to make sure that I'm selecting a new layer. I'll go ahead and put the other one in the background so I know where to place it. And we're going to go select the ball tool. And I'm going to make sure that the ball is selected from the back view. And now if I hit the control key from the top view, notice that it makes it a nice, smooth, perfectly round cylinder. So now I can move this in place and it's in position. I'm going to pull this down, up a little bit, and this can be considerably larger. So I'm going to continue to hold down the command key, or control key rather, and let's bring this up a little bit. And let's go ahead and place it again so that it's in the right position. I might have to make it smaller. We'll see what happens here. Right click and pull it down. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. I blew it. Well, now that I fixed it, what do? I can delete it and start over, or I can go ahead and I can select a few polygons. Whoops, didn't want to do that. I can go ahead and turn off the ball tool, select a few polygons, say select connected. So there's always workarounds. And then if it's still too small or too big, we'll see. I'm going to left click. Whoops. I'm select connected. There we go. We want to hit T for move. And I want to move it down a little bit. Like so. And let's look from the side view. And this is supposed to be forward a little bit. Let's go ahead and, because I'm not thinking clearly at the moment, I'm going to go ahead and hit D for display. And bottom left, I'm going to bring the image back. And it's directly underneath. I was thinking of the speaker. So this is a little bit too big. So what do? Hit Shift H and let's shrink it down a little bit so that it looks proper proportions. Hit T for move and move it in position here. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm ready to build his legs. But before I do, I'm going to go ahead and turn off move, deselect the polys. And actually, this could have been rotated 90 degrees. The orientation of this one is not important, but the orientation when we make his mouth or speaker will be important. So let's go ahead and hit Q. And I already have Chrome, since that's what that is. And we'll add Chrome to the selection. There we go. I'm going to cut it. Whoops. Didn't want that. Let's hit Q. Make sure that I have that. Hit Chrome. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut it. Go to the previous layer and paste it. There we go. So now we're ready to build the legs. And you know what? I kind of like it to be positioned so that it's pointy at the top here. So I'm going to, instead of, I'll just do it from selection center, etc. Whoa, 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 whoa. See, nothing is selected, everything is selected. Turn off, rotate, select a few polygons, select connected. And again, hit Y for rotate. I'll go ahead and rotate it like so. So it's rotating from it. We've got a top like so. There we go. That looks much better. Okay. So hit turn off, Y for rotate, deselect, and I'm set to go to build the legs. So again, the legs are like cylinders. So we're going to do something similar, but different. Remember, we're going to add geometry, but because I plan on building the foot separate from the leg and I want to attach it, I'll use quite a few segments, but not as many that defined the circular part of, or the round part of the cylinder. So, and you'll see why later when I start using the weld tool for that. So I'm going to start by building it outward, the same direction as arm, and then I'm going to bend it down and I'm going to stretch it to create this little flare for the bottom and his leg. So let's go ahead and select a new layer, put this one in the background. And again, let's start with our disc tool. And right from the center here, we're going to click and drag to get something that's about right proportions, maybe a lot like so. And then I'm going to pull it out. And then I'm going to move it over so it is right, just slightly attached to his torso. Okay. Maybe let's see how long that is. That might work. I may have to make adjustments, but I want the numeric requester up because, as I said, I don't need all those segments. Okay, I can go back here and, well, I do need them. I misspoke. I do want a whole bunch of them. I'll use 36 though, instead of 48. Where I don't need the great number is, I don't need the number of sides. And I'm going to take that back all the way to 8. I only want 8 sides. And it looks kind of chunky at the moment, but when we turn on sub patches, it will be just fine. So I'm done creating it, but now I need to look and I can see that it is slightly reduced in size here. So pull evenly would be a good one to use for that. And then it is flattened and then bent. So what I want to do to flatten it, and I also need to stretch it too to get this flared part out. So it's a complex move here. Let's see how effectively I can do this. I'm going to start with, again, the pull evenly tool. So I'm going to go to modify and I'm going to select pull evenly. And I'm going to right click and drag here and right click and move it over a little bit. And pull down, right click and drag. Make sure the whole thing is encased in that. And now what I can do again from the right view is I can left click. Let me make sure that this is, again, this is completely engulfed in here. Then I can left click from here and see. And let's see if I can pull this in just a little bit. You know what? That's not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this out a little bit, like so. And pull this in. Again, a lot of, trial and error. So I'm going to go ahead again. I want to pull it in, to bend it in just a little bit. That's where I want my bend. Okay, so you see it's tucked in a little bit. And then what I want to do is I want to flatten it. So after I've got that tucked in just a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and turn off pull evenly. And now what I want to do is I want to flatten it, but I don't want to flatten it uniformly. I want to flatten it so that it's broad at the bottom and it's flat at the top. So how do I do that? I use the stretch tool. Let me see something here to make sure I did this correctly. No, I'm going to go back again. And I'm going to bring up the pull evenly because it looks like, yeah, see, this really needs to be stretched out a bit more. So I'm going to make sure that this is stretched out. This is stretched out. Make sure that it's centered over it. And then I can left click. Pull it in just a little bit. There we go. It wasn't tucking in from the back view here, just a little. Okay, now I can go ahead and I can turn off pull evenly. And now I'm ready to use the stretch tool. So H for stretch. And we can see right now that there's no fall off. That's when we have the numeric requester up, because by default you don't. I want it to be linear this time. And I want it to stretch and to be flattened from here and then get it bulged out towards the end. So I'm going to right click from here to here and make sure that it's centered up. So I'm going to right click and drag down and right click and drag down. I'm getting it all lined up with that. And now what I can do from the right view is I can left click and begin to make it wider. Okay, and then I can stretch it outward. So I have that bell effect. Now, possibly what I need to do is flatten this even more. So I'm going to undo this. And I'm going to turn off. Let's go ahead and I have stretch. So I'm going to go ahead and I want the whole thing stretched pretty much. I'm talking to myself here. So I'm going to come back here. And I want it to start to be flattened here and then get bigger. So let me try this. I'm going to flatten it here a little bit. No, that's not what I want. I want this to be, know what I'm going to do? Let me turn off stretch. I'm going to select the end polygon here. Let's try this. And I'm going to go ahead like I've done before, is I want it from here to here, slightly flattened, and then I'm going to stretch it and make it much wider. So to add to that selection, I'm going to go ahead and I hit the Shift key, and then I hit the right curly brace. And I get all the way to here. And now if I hit H for stretch, and I don't want any fall off. And now when I flattened it, notice that it flattens from there just a little bit. That's not what I want either. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and let's do it from there. So hit H for stretch. That's more like it. Okay. A little like it. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the fall off back on. So I don't need to select those points. So I'm going to turn off stretch and deselect. And I'm going to turn stretch back on. And now what I want to do is go ahead and go back to fall off and go back to linear. And I want it to start to stretch from here to here. And again, I need to line it up. A little bit tedious, but get the idea here. And now what I want it to do is I want it to get that bell effect. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the bell like so, and like here. Okay, so that looks about right. So I'm using the stretch tool to get this flared out like so. Okay, so I'm content with that. It's not quite the way I had hoped, but it's close enough for our purposes. And now I need to use bend because I want it to bend downward. How am I doing on time? I'm doing good on time. So now I'm ready to use bend. And I want this to be a really abrupt bend. I want it to start right here. Because if I pull it out too far, it's going to be a smooth curve. And I don't want it to be a smooth curve. I want it to be, let's move this over like so. I'm right clicking and dragging as I'm doing this. So if I pull this all the way out here and I left click and I bend, I move my mouse down. See how the smooth curve that I get? I don't want that. I want it to be more abrupt. So I'm going to right click and pull this all the way back like so. Pull this back like so. And I want it to be pretty sharp bend. Right in here. And now I can go ahead and select bend. And that's more of what I'm going for. And when, again, looking at all the views, making sure that it is perfectly perpendicular. And it takes a little bit with the mouse to try to get things working here. It's easy, really easy to be off. You can see that I'm struggling here to get mine working here today. That looks about right, but it's not quite. You know what? Undo and try again. Let me zoom out a little bit. Pull it down. Keep going. I'm looking at the back view. I'm looking at the right view, and I'm looking at the top view. And when I have it bent the way I want it, I let go of the mouse. So far, so good. That's how I want it, okay? Now, the next step is to build a foot. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off bend. And I need a cylinder again to create his foot. So I'm going to work on the same layer, but I'm going to select the cylinder here. And I want to make sure that I have 8 sides. So here, and let's see, I want the disc tool. And I want this to be like so. I'm making it purposely a little bit big, but this is going to be his foot. And I don't need 36 segments. I only need 2. And now from the right view, I'll pull this down a little bit. And then zoom in a little bit to move this down. Position it, and you can see that his heel is to the right. And make sure that it's centered over here. There we go. That looks okay. If I need to change the proportions, I will. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit flatter. There we go. It's all centered, and now I'm set to go. Now what I want to do is I want to join this cylinder to this one to create his foot. Now I could have done it differently. There are other ways by using bevel and smooth shift to do that. Probably just the bevel tool. But before I can attach these, I need to get rid of the end cap. So I'm going to come back up here. And I'm going to, with polygons selected, I'm going to select this end cap down here and go ahead and hit K for kill. And now I'm going to select the end cap for here, and I'm going to hit K for kill. And now I'm ready to attach one to the other. And I can do that quite nicely in my perspective view. Okay, so in order to do that, we have to go to, let's see. I want to go to Detail tab and select Weld. Before I can weld, though, I need to select points. So I'm going to go ahead and select this point, hold down the Shift key and select this point. And now I can go ahead and I can hit Weld. And that goes, this point welds to that. Now, it's important to note which points you select first. If I were to select this point, hold down the shift key and select this point and select weld, notice what happens. I don't want that. I want from the foot to go to the leg. So if I select this point first, hold down the shift key and then select this one, and I select weld, that's what I want. And now what I do is I kind of go around the horn here and make sure that all 8, that's why I reduced it to 8. So to actually try to connect 24 points would be kind of a pain. So now I'll select this point and then select this point. So we're selecting like with like, so to speak. Select this point and then hold down the shift key and select this point and then weld. And then I'm rotating this around a bit. And again, select here and hit weld. So just going all the way around, making sure that you don't cross in any way. But try to line these up. But I only have 8 welds, and that makes it kind of nice. And one more. Select weld. There we go. So now let's zoom out. And let's see how my proportions are relative to his. Okay. Now I could move that up, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and drag around here. And I'm going to move that up a little bit. So it's a little bit flatter. I'm going to hit T for move and move it up just a little bit from the right view. And we'll see, because the next step that I want to do is smooth all this out to make it look a little bit more organic is let's deselect, let's turn off T for move. Let's deselect the points and let's hit the tab key. And you'll see that I get an error message because of the down at the bottom. Okay. I have 8 points, and to use subpatches, it only likes 4 points. So a couple of things that I want to do to dress it up a little bit. You can see that it tucks in here just a little bit. So let's go ahead and let me move this out of the way. And let's look at textured wired. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select a row of polys here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click here. Then I'm going to go ahead and select loop. And now what I can do is I can hit Shift H to resize. And then make sure that it's from the center of selection and then move it in a little bit. That looks pretty good. And you can see how I'm getting that ridge. Okay, if I need to move everything up, I can to flatten everything. So I can also go ahead and hit Shift. I don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and let's select from the bottom. Let's deselect. What do I have selected? I have size selected. I don't want size selected. I have to deselect size. Oh, come on. Let's go to modify, turn off size. There we go. Deselect these. And then I'm going to work with some proportions here. I think his foot needs to be a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to points. And I'm going to right click and select a few of these points here. Hit T for move and move it forward a little bit. Undo. I need to zoom in a little. My foot's bending here. So let's pull this down a little bit. That looks good. Deselect move. Let's go ahead and select the bottom poly. Switch to polygons. Select the pot. And I'm going to go ahead and shift right. And I want to make his foot a little bit flatter. So now let's select these and move these up a little bit. And now I'm going to reduce. Let's go ahead and move this up a little bit. T for move. So now I'm playing with proportions. I mean, I have the overall look I'm going for. So that's pretty much it. Now what I need to do is build his knee. And once that's done, then what we're going to do is I'll finish this on Wednesday. Okay, but then just using a sphere, we'll build his knee. And then I'll show you how to, since we have for him, his leg, we have both gold and red. How do you divide those? We'll do that. Okay. So we got pretty far today. Again, lots of tweaking, lots of adjustments. Again, starting with very basic shapes and using many of the modify tools in order to make the necessary changes. Okay. So let's see, any questions before we leave today? Probably in some of my older videos, I did a smoother demonstration. One that was less, I went about it, but this is probably what you're going to encounter is, you're going to have to, as you're building it, make lots of tweaks and adjustments and before and after until you get the look you're going for. And if you're not happy with it, rebuild it. And that's what I might do with mine. Okay. There's a little bit, because I'm trying to make it look as much like the one in the photo as possible. Okay. No questions from any of you? No? Okay, then let's call it a day. And when we get back, I will come back and I'm going to tweak the proportions of this leg and we'll build the knee and we'll build, and I'll show you how to create a multiple kind of surface for it. Okay, and then we can move on to his mouth, and we should be able to get that done on Wednesday too. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. You guys are free to leave. I got everybody who's here. So, okay.